In this lecture, you'll learn about how network load balancing and redundancy works for SAN protocols. You learned in the logical interface lecture that it is recommended to assign one data lift per node, per protocol, per network, per SVM. That enables spreading out the overall load across all of your nodes, and that leverages all of the available hardware, the CPU, the RAM, etc. in all the nodes in your cluster. Traffic will go over the cluster network if a client connects to a different node than where the volume is located. That adds minimal latency, and that tiny amount of latency that it's added is far outweighed by the benefits you get of the overall load balancing performance gain by spreading the traffic across all of the different nodes. So let's have a look at how we're going to lay out our lifts. Looking at an example here, we've got a Department A SVM. They are using iSCSI, and they have got a LUN1 in volume 1 and a LUN2 in volume 2. The lifts that we configure for Department A iSCSI access, we configure Department A lift 1 with IP address 10.10.10.10, Department A lift 2 with 10.10.10.11, lift 3 is .12, and lift 4 is .13. So you can see that on each of our nodes, we've got two lifts there because we're connected to two separate networks. And for this example, we're going to have a Department B SVM as well, which is sharing the underlying physical ports. That's why in this example, we're using VLAN interfaces here. So that's EOA.10, E1A.10, EOA.10, and E1A.10 on the other node as well. And then Department B is also using iSCSI. We've got a Department B Volume 1 with LUN1 there, and Department B Vol 2 with LUN2 there. We configure VLAN interfaces for Department B. So Department A was using .10 and VLAN 10. Department B, for this example, we're going to use .20 and VLAN 20, and we configure that on each of the physical ports again. Then our lifts for Department B are going to be in a different IP subnet. So Department A was 10.10.10, Department B is 10.10.20, and we're using .10, .11, .12, and .13 again. So that's how we're laying out our lifts for this example. Now, our SAN protocols use multipath. The SAN client learns all the usable IP addresses, or WWPNs if it's fiber channel, on the target, and the client can use that intelligence to make its own decision on which path or paths to use. And because the client knows all the available paths, it can fail over to another IP address or WWPN if the one or more than one that it's using goes down. So let's have a look and see how this is going to work. Now, you're going to learn a lot more about the SAN protocols when we get into the SAN section. The basics for now are that the client, which is the initiator, and the storage system, which is the target, they are going to negotiate with each other. When you initially set this up, you tell the host one of the IP addresses on the storage system. So let me just go back a couple of slides here. Let's say that this is a Department A client, and it's the client which is going to be using LUN1. On that Department A client, you configure it with one of these IP addresses. So you configure it with either 10.10.10.10 or .11 or 12 or 13. It really doesn't matter which one. Just tell the client how it can reach its storage. It will then connect out to the storage system, and the client and the storage system will talk to each other, and the storage system will tell the client, hey, you can reach me through 10.10.10.10, .11, .12, or .13. And in our example, the LUN is on node 1. So the storage system will tell the client that you can reach your LUN through this path here, and it says that is an optimized path. It's an optimized path because the connection is terminating on the node which owns the LUN. So if the host is communicating directly with node 1 over the network, and then it's sending reads or writes to its LUN. That's going to go straight through the SAS cables on node 1 down to the disk shelf here. So there is the first optimized path, which is through Fabric A and terminating on node 1. There's also another optimized path going through Fabric B, which also terminates on node 1, so that is an optimized path as well. The storage system will also tell the client about the non-optimized paths. So it will also tell the host that it can reach its LUN through this path here, which terminates on node 2, which does not own the LUN, so that is a non-optimized path. That was going through the Fabric A switch. And finally, we've got another path here, non-optimized again, because it terminates again on a different node than the one which owns the LUN, and this is going through Fabric B. So the storage system will tell the client, those are the 4 paths that you can use to get to your LUN. These are the 2 optimized paths, and also you've got 2 non-optimized paths. Then, using the software, the multipath client, on the client side, you can configure whether you want to use active-active or active standby. If you use active-active, the host is going to use both of its optimized paths to get to its LUN. So there's the 2 active-active paths, and it will load balance traffic through both of those paths. If one of the paths fails, so here it's the connection between the node and the switch. If that happens, then the client will learn that that path has gone down, and it will continue to send traffic just through the available remaining path. So that gave us our load balancing and our redundancy as well. We could also optionally configure the client to use active standby rather than active-active. So in the example here, the client is using the green path. It knows about this orange standby path as well. So what's going to happen here is if that active path goes down, so if anything in this path fails, the client will learn that, and when it learns it, it will transition to using the standby path, will now become the new active. So we had the redundancy there. Another thing that could happen is that the node fails, node 1. So here we're looking at active-active again. The client is sending traffic active-active through both available optimized paths, and then node 1 fails. So node 1 fails, the client will learn that node 1 has failed. What's going to happen is node 2, because it is the HA partner of node 1, it will detect that node 1 has gone down. It will take ownership of node 1's disks, and now it's going to be the SAS cables on node 2 connected to those disk shelves that are going to be used. The client will learn about its new best paths, and the traffic is going to go through the Fabric A and the Fabric B switches again, but it's going to use the connections that terminate on node 2 rather than node 1, so it can still get to its storage. So you saw there with the SAN protocols that the load balancing and the redundancy is built into the SAN protocol. The initiator and the target are going to communicate with each other. The initiator, which is the client, is going to learn the available paths, the optimized and the non-optimized paths, and using the software on the client, you can configure whether you want to use active-active or active standby. Because the client knows about all of the available paths and it knows the state of those paths, if the path that it is using fails, it will fail over to one of the other available paths. Thanks for watching. If you want to get hands-on practice with NetApp storage for free on your laptop, then you can download my free ebook, which you can see above my head right now. Also check out my NetApp Storage Complete course, which will teach you everything you could possibly want to know about ONTAP. Thanks.